Alright, so this time I'm going to talk about how you can create the IKFK ARM setup. Right now I've just created the one single chain here, which is starting from arm, then elbow, and then the wrist, right? And this is going to be used for binding the geometry to the joints. So these are actually the bind joints. I could easily add a bind suffix to the names, but for now I will just name them left arm joint, or left elbow joint, and left wrist joint. And if you notice here, I also included left clavicle joint, but it's actually separated from the joint chain here, because right now I just want to duplicate these chains 2 times, and I don't wanna have them to be a child of this clavicle for now. So I'm going to duplicate this chain 2 times, and each one would be one of them would be for the FK setup, and the other one would be for the IK setup. So first I need to rename these. So this is going to be the IK setup. So I'm going to add a IK suffix here, IK. So it's left arm IK joint. This one is going to be left elbow IK joint. And left wrist IK joint. The other one would be the FK setup. So this is going to be FK, left arm FK joint, left elbow FK joint, and left wrist FK joint. Okay. So in order to set up all these IK and FK controllers, it's much easier to do all of those connections and IKs and pan constraints and everything inside the outliner. It's much easier because we are dealing with 3 sets of joint chains that are sitting on top of each other, and it's impossible to, for example, select the right joint that when we want to create the IK, or select the right joint when we want to create the pan constraints. So it's much easier to do all of those setup here in the outliner. Okay, I'm gonna bring this leg group on top so it's not in our way. So let's first focus on setting up the IK controller. So for that reason, I'm going to create one simple controller. I'm gonna snap it to the hand here. Okay, I'm gonna shape it and rotate it whatever I want, in whatever shape I want. I can just simply select the CVs of this controller, this circle, and scale them down to create a different shape for it, right? And then I'm going to name it. So freeze transformation, delete history on it, and then name it to left wrist or hand, doesn't matter, IK, and control, right? So this is the controller. And then I'm going to create an IK for the chain. So make sure that you are setting it up on the IK chain here. So I'm going to go to skeleton, create IK, start from left arm IK to left wrist IK. I'm holding down control here because I'm doing it in the outliner. Okay, and it will give me the IK handle. I'm gonna name it left wrist IK. Okay. Now it's time to control it using this controller. So for the IK setup, we just need to have one controller for controlling the IK handle, and later on we can also create a aim controller to be able to control the direction of the bend that is going to happen on the elbow. But for now, I'm just focused on creating the IK-FK switch, and I'm not worried about that aim controller. So I'm going to select the IK controller, IK itself, and go to constraint, pan constraint. Okay. So if I select the controller, I can see that the IK chain is following this controller. Alright, so we are done with the IK setup, that's it. I can even hide this controller for now, so I'm going to turn off its visibility. I don't want to see this IK anymore, so I can even turn off the visibility of the IK as well. Okay. So now it's time to create the FK setup. For the FK, however, we are having this issue with the orientation of the joints. And if we create controllers, we always need to have the orientation of the controllers to match to the joints. So let's see what I'm talking about. I'm going to create a nerve circle, and I'm going to snap it to the joint here. Right now my character is having this T pose here, but sometimes your character might have an A pose, and even in T poses you cannot eyeball to match the orientation of the controller to the joints, because we always have a slight bend here on the elbow, and if we try to match the orientation and rotation of the controller to the elbow, it's impossible to do that, because it's risky. We cannot just guess it. So there is a way to do that. There is a solution for it. And the solution here is that we are going to leverage the world space and local space in Maya. So let's start with this arm here. I'm going to match the orientation of this controller to the arm joint. In order to do that, I can temporarily make this controller to be a child of this joint here, right? So I'm going to hide this. It really doesn't matter now, but I'm going to hide this. I'm going to hide this one too. And I'm just focused on the FK key. So I'm going to select the controller, select the arm joint, arm FK joint, and I'm going to hit P. So right now this controller is going to be the child of this joint here. And it means that if I zero out these numbers, okay, the controller is going to have the same orientation with the joint. I can also select the controller and rotate it in this angle, in this axis, by 90 degrees. Okay. And if I even freeze the transformation on it, you can see that I'm having 0 numbers here because I froze the transformation, and also I'm sure that the orientation is matched to the joint. And that's only because this circle is the child of the FK arm joint here. And it's inside this wall, which means that if I freeze the transformation on any child of any object, it will try to match its orientation to match to the parent. Okay. So now I have matched the orientation of the controller to the joint, and because I want to maintain it, and I want to have the controller at the end, I want to have the controller to control the joint. I don't want it to be the child of the joint. So I should unparent it from the joint. But if I unparent it, look what happens. I will end up having numbers here. If I freeze the transformation, I will lose the orientation here. So I should figure out a way to maintain these orientations and also be able to unparent this controller. So I hit undo to bring it back to the joint. Okay. And before unparenting it, I'm going to group this controller to itself. Okay. So I hit Ctrl G to make a group on top of the controller. Okay. And now if I unparent the group, as you can see, the numbers are going to show up on the group, but the circle itself is having 0 numbers, and all the orientations are still matched to the joint. Okay. You should not freeze the transformation on this group at all. If you freeze the transformation, you will lose the orientation. So do not do that. This group is actually a holder from all these numbers. Eventually we are going to lock all these numbers here, so we are not going to accidentally change them. So for now, let's make sure that we are not touching them, we are not changing these numbers, and we are not freezing the transformation. So I'm going to name this left arm FK control. And for the group, I'm going to name it same name with a suffix of underline group. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing for the elbow. So for the elbow, I'm going to create a new circle, snap it to the elbow. I can even parent it to, I should even parent it to the elbow, and then zero out these numbers, okay, by typing in 0. Rotate it in Z direction. It really depends on the orientation of your character, so you should do it manually and see which attribute you need to change to set it to 90 degrees. Freeze the transformation. Okay. Can scale it down to make it more beautiful. Freeze transformation. Okay. Then again, before unparenting it, I'm going to create a group. Okay. And then unparent the group. Again, I will end up having these numbers on top. But if I select the controller itself, the numbers are 0. So this one is going to be left elbow. If I only can change the name, but I can't. Left elbow FK control. And this is going to be left elbow FK control underline group. And the last one is going to be the wrist. Create circle. Select the wrist joint. Hit P. Okay. Zero out the numbers. Rotate it in Z direction. Scale it down. And freeze the transformation. Okay. Again, before unparenting it, create a group, and then unparent the group. So this time this is going to be left wrist FK control, and the group left wrist FK control group. Alright. So we created the controllers. We know that the controllers are having the same orientation with the joints. Now it's time to create the parent constraint. So whenever I move any of these controllers or rotate them, it will rotate their FK joints here. So one by one, wrist controls the wrist. Remember, we are in FK, so make sure that we are selecting the FK joints. FK constraint. Parent. Elbow FK, parent, constraint. Arm FK, I'm hitting G, parent constraint. Okay. And you might say, okay, we are all set, but if we test it, for example, if I test this one, if I select the wrist controller, I'm expecting to see the same rotation on the joint. You can't see it, but I mean, actually the joint is rotating. I mean, you can see that the rotation axis of it are rotating. But the problem here is that if I rotate this one, it is rotating the joint, but the children of this chain are not following this rotation. And that's because these joints are now just following their controllers and not the joints here. So if I want to have the joints to follow this rotation, I have to actually create the hierarchy on the controllers. So whenever, for example, I rotate this one, it will rotate this controller for me. The controller will move and rotate the joint, right? So I will zero out these. I will create the hierarchy on the controllers. And also we should be careful about creating the hierarchy here. But because if we simply select the wrist controller, select the elbow controller, and then parent it here, we will actually lose this group here. We shouldn't lose that. We should keep that group here. So when we are creating the hierarchy, make sure that you select the group of the child and parent it to the upper controller. So the group of the wrist controller, control select the elbow controller, okay? Hit T. The group will be the child of the controller, hit P. So if I expand this set of controllers for the FK setup, you can see that I will start with a group, then a controller, then a group, then a controller, then a group, then a controller, okay? And now if I want to test it, I can simply select the top controller here, and as you can see, everything is being controlled. Alright, so we are all set for the FK setup as well. Let's unhide these chains here. So the FK is working. The IK, let's see where is the IK controller. Here we go. The IK is working, right? And now it's time to make sure that these bind joints are following these two parents. So let's undo to go back to the default pose. I'm gonna bring up the IK controller, and now we want to have these two IK and FK joints to control the rotation and movement of the bind joints. So we are having two parents and one child. So we should create the parent-child relationship using constraints. We cannot physically parent them in the outliner because we are dealing with two parents and one child. So let's go one by one. I'm going to select the FK joint for the arm, the IK joint for the arm, and then the bind joint for the arm. So FK, IK, bind joint. And I'm going to go to constraint and parent constraint. Same for the elbow, FK, IK, bind, constraint. And wrist, FK, IK, and the bind joint, constraint. Okay? So you might say, okay, we are all set because we created the parent-child relationship between the joints. But the only problem here is that now each one of these joints are actually following the orders from two parents. Which means that if I, for example, pose the character in FK mode, as you can see the FK chain is moving. The bind joint is also following it, but as you can see, it's following it in a way that it's actually averaging the order from the IK and FK. And that's because on all of these parent constraint nodes on the bind joints, when we created them, as you can see, we are having two parents, and both of them are having equal weights on the children. So if we want to switch between each one of these parents, we should control them using one attribute that actually switches between 0 and 1 for each one of these weights. So let's show you that. I'm going to go back to default pose on the FK, and I'm going to create one custom attribute somewhere in the scene. Usually I will create a controller, a curve here on the hand that will follow the joints here, but for now, just to make it more simple, I'm going to add it on my master controller here. So I'm going to create one master controller here. I'm going to call it master control. Right? Freeze the transformation, delete the history, and I'm going to add one custom attribute here, add attribute. I'm going to call it lift and FK. And because it's a switch, I can just simply define a minimum and maximum for it. So 0 and 1 for its minimum and maximum, and saying that, for example, if we are setting the attribute to 0, we are in IK mode. If we set it to 1, we are in FK mode. So I'm going to add it. It will show up here. And I'm going to have this attribute to control all the weights on these three parent constraints that I have created. So remember, we are having three parent constraints on the bind joint. We have to control their weights here. So one by one, I'm going to load them as driven, and I'm going to use setDriven key to control these weights using that attribute. So I'm going to select this, select the attribute, going to setDriven key. Okay, and I'm going to load it as the driver because this is going to drive the FKIK for us. And I'm going to one by one select each one of these parent constraint nodes, load them as driven, and set up my setDriven key. So at first, I will select the attribute here, and I can see that right now I'm 0 for the FK, which means that I'm in IK mode. So I'm going to control the weights here in a way that the bind joints are following the IK joints, right? So I'm going to select this. Look at the names here, left wrist, FK, left wrist, IK. So when I'm in the IK mode, I have to set the weight for the FK to be 0. And the IK would be 1. So this is the driver. Again, we are in IK mode. And 0 and 1 for the weights for the FK and IK. So it's time to set the key for it. I will select the attribute, select these two attributes and hit key. And as you can see, it will show a blue bar here, which means that there is a key on these two attributes. Now let's set it back to IK, or I'm sorry, FK. Okay. Then select the parent node and reverse these weights. Okay. Make sure you select those two attributes and this attribute, and then hit key. Alright. We have to do the same thing for all of these parent constraints. So I will load this one as driven and do the same thing. So we are in FK, select those two attributes and hit key. We are in IK, select the two attributes. We are in IK, so we should reverse these weights and make sure that they are selected and hit key. Same as this one. So I'm going to load it as driven. We are in IK, so we are in IK, which means that the FK should be 0. Select those two attributes and hit key. Again, go back to FK and reverse these weights. Hit key. Okay, so we are done with the set driven key. We are controlling all these weights using one attribute here. So if I pose the character in FK mode, for example, and also move the IK handle here, okay, then I use this attribute, you can see that the bind joints are going to switch between the IK and FK. Right now I think they are following the FK, but if I turn it off, I'm switching between IK and FK, right? So the joint chain that is moving here is actually the bind joint. So I'm switching between IK and FK. Alright? So that's it for setting up the FK-IK switch. I think that's it, right?